Eventually I'm going to get this sucker right. So this is the second lecture for the week. It will be nowhere near as long as the first one is. I apologize that the first one went so long. But we need to talk a little bit about style, because it's going to be something that you need to know so that you can figure out how you want to wander towards your ultimate project. So first, it's what I thought of, so we have to have a clip.
Take him!
Well, you may not like him, Minister, but you can't deny Dumbledore's got style.
It was better in the book, but whatever. So when we look at what style you're going to follow, it actually depends on what type of research you do in terms of the field, because the way that you write a paper in English is actually different than the way you would write a paper in science. And even then, the sciences depends. Is this a biology paper? Is this a chemistry paper? Is this a physics paper? Is this an earth science paper? Is this an environmental science paper? They have different ways of writing and different ways of citing in the way that things get formatted. So, as you can tell at the screen, you have things like natural sciences, so that would be things like math and what you think of as science of the lives and the physical sciences. Arts, so whether that's painting or sculpting or dancing or music, that's all art. Literature, obviously, that's the type that you are used to, because that's what they teach you in an English class, because that's what it would be. History is pure history. It's not things like psychology or government or economics. Those are actually social sciences. The computational sciences are anything that are computer-based or mathematical in origin. So I guess I misspoke when I clumped those under the natural sciences. Some places do that, and I can't even read my own list. But computational sciences, things involving numbers. Statistics, actually not. If you were to pick something in statistics, I'm actually not entirely sure which one it would fall under, because you use statistics in natural sciences, but you also use it in computation. You could use it in social science. You can actually use it in a whole bunch of places. So there's some variables. But all of them, you're going to have to gather data. You're not going to be gathering data from someone else. Well, you might be. It depends on the type of study you do, or whether it's like a meta-analysis or something like that. But you're going to need to gather data. And the type of data you aim to gather will dictate a lot of what you need to do. So this video here, it's 2 minutes, deals with data types.
Hello, welcome to Moo Moo Math, where we upload a new math video every day. In this video, I'd like to talk about data. Data can be divided into two groups called quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data is numerical. Qualitative data is descriptive data. Let's look at some examples of both.
I liked this video, but I never noticed at the start how quantitative was misspelled.
The temperature outside.
Go back and look.
Quantitative data can be graphed. If you count or measure, you are collecting quantitative data. There are two types of quantitative data, discrete and continuous. Discrete data is usually data you can count, and continuous data is usually data that you measure. I have a separate video on these two types of data. Qualitative data is descriptive or observation and uses words. For example, the color of a house, the smell of a sock, the texture of a shirt. Let's look at quantitative or qualitative. Consider a cat. The quantitative data would be that the cat has 4 legs and weighs 10 pounds. The qualitative data would be the cat is yellow and has soft fur. Let's look at a bookshelf. The quantitative data would be you have 50 books on the bookshelf and is 50 centimeters tall. The qualitative data would be that it is multicolor and has a smooth surface. Hope this video helps on quantitative and qualitative data. Moo Moo Math uploads a new math video every day. Thanks for watching.
We'll deal with how you actually analyze those types of data later. Data turns out to be a plural term, so it's data are and data show and things like that. It's among my pet peeves. And he didn't violate it. But knowing what you're going for, are you going for descriptions or are you going for numbers? That will actually dictate a lot of what you want to do. If you know that you like the idea of quantitative data, you want numbers, but you know you're not a fan of math, you might wish to reconsider what your question turns out to be, because changing the question will change, in some cases, what data you're gathering. So, again, what you pick will reflect, in terms of data, will reflect in your question, and if you change your question, you'll change the type of data you get. As you could tell by this just figure that I found online, what you gather has a profound impact on how you analyze it and the conclusions that you can possibly draw. And it actually changes quite a few things. And it's not that one is better than the other, they're just different, but you need to know which one you're going for, and that starts with your question. There is a version of this which is called a mixed methods, which is a little bit of qualitative and a little bit of quantitative. And the order that you go in doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, you can use qualitative information that leads into quantitative, or you can go quantitative that leads into qualitative. Qualitative data, descriptions are usually pretty good, I'm speaking very generally, for trying to explain something. Quantitative data is trying to find, is there a pattern? It's not always the case, but pretty decent. Qualitative, explain. Quantitative, is there a pattern? The other thing that you need to look at is what type of question do you actually wish to ask? And there are three major types. And all of those 6 categories at the beginning could fall under any of these 3, and it really depends on how you want to mix and match. So you can, when you look at these, so like the first one says explore. That would be saying, hey, what exists? And usually when you go for existence, are there patterns that exist? Explore tends, or exploring questions tend to lend themselves better with quantitative data. Much like explaining questions, explaining is words, although sometimes it could be mathematical. I'm not thinking of any off the top of my head, but usually it's usually with words. Explaining is, why is this? What is the cause of this? Let's look at something a little bit deeper. Create is usually, it's a process. The point of your question is to do something. And usually the act of creation answers all sorts of questions. So this would be things that are really good for the arts, although arts don't need to necessarily fall under this, but it's what immediately pops into my head. So it's like trying to replicate a certain art technique that we've only think exists, but you're going to try and apply it in a different way than it's ever been done. That would be a create. Perfectly legit. And it's actual factual research still. The catch with all of this, with the domain, what type of data you're going to gather, what type of question you have, is it requires you to kind of know what you want, but it also requires you to know what you want to ask. You need to have a good question. And it's hard to write good questions. I am better at judging and critiquing and helping with questions. I can't actually help you with your questions. I can ask questions, but that's all I'm allowed to do, and no one else gets to do that too. It needs to be your question. But if you can have a good question, it will make everything easier, because it should lay out not all the minutia, but it should help you with answering what the domain is. Are you going for qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods? Are you going to explore? Are you going to explain? Are you going to create something? A good question is able to answer all of those things for you and make this research process as easy as possible. But it requires you to do some reading into some other stuff, thinking what you're interested in or where there might be knowledge gaps. Once you can have that, It's coming up with questions, and where do those questions turn out to lie? And we're going to do lots of practice with answering, like, what type of question is this? Is it a good question? Is it a bad question? And having you work on questions too.